Welcome to the PlantFit Summit, bringing you the best in plant-based health and fitness. This is Luke and Toby, and today we have Catherine Devine. Catherine is a yoga teacher and an unbeatable mind coach. Her teachings are steeped in the traditional studies of yoga, somatic healing through breath, and philosophy. She's a co-author of Kokoro Yoga and the soon-to-be-released Sacred Silence. We start the conversation with Catherine sharing about what her definition of alignment is. Enjoy the presentation.
For me, what alignment means is when my thoughts, my words, and my actions are all are the same, right? And I think that's actually the foundation for happiness or contentment, is when what I'm thinking, what I'm speaking, and what I'm doing is all the same. So that for me is the definition of alignment.
With all that's happened with COVID and lockdowns and stress and people that are kind of stuck at home, some people react differently, and some people seek personal growth, seek a collective mindset to work together to find solutions, while others are very reactionary and kind of fear and almost fear mongering. Why is that?
I really believe there's a few different reasons for that. So first, that hard wiring to get into fear. So that innate reaction is in all of us, right? And I think for those who maybe haven't ever learned in their lives to use that fear and direct it towards something positive, they get stuck in that. I also think the media plays a huge role in that. So I have my bachelor's degree in film, and I studied it on the theoretical side more than like the making side of it. And I took classes on like news media and things like that. And the theory behind that is it's all fear-based. So people that really plug in to, they format those shows, they format the press, even the written stuff to invoke fear because it keeps people hooked and in that process. So that's a little side note. And so I think for people that kind of get stuck or drawn into fear, they're in survival mode and they have never really learned how to get out of it. I think people that seek the personal development or growth have had some point in their life where they had either an experience where a negative turned into a positive, or opportunities presented to them to shift out of fear into that growth mindset, whether it was a teacher, a coach, a parent, or, a friend. So something happens, I think, developmentally, probably whether, in our social environments or where we live, all of those, I think, play into how you fall into fear, or if you're going to reach out and, because like, for instance, for those who are living somewhere where they're not even getting clean drinking water, they're not thinking about personal development, right? They're really in survival mode because they need to get water. So I think that's where the big difference for me is, kind of social, economic, as well as taught mindset.
Definitely. I think that really brings to mind like the five plateaus, which I would love to get into a little bit later. And I also resonate with that because I think I had my own 3 pivotal moments in my life which shook me up, that made me kind of get out of, it's almost like a archetypal descent, and it's like the hero's journey, and then you kind of learn and grow after that. So I understand that. So what I also know is you talk about the courage and fear, and I understand that there's a courage loop and the fear loop. So maybe you could explain what that means.
Yeah. So when we get into fear, it's like something false appearing to be real is one of the ways to look at it. So if it's not an actual threat, so if, like in that way, when people talk about the amygdala and we get going into fight or flight and the survival mode. So if that is hardwired into all human beings because of the dinosaur age, right? When we were in that, but that's not really happening anymore. So a lot of our brains still can't totally discern the difference between a real life threat, like a tiger coming after us, or if there's a conflict, let's say at work, and that can still trigger people into fight or flight. So anyways, the fear loop gets into that negative thinking pattern where I'm not safe, there's something wrong. Another one could be, I'm not good enough, there's no place for me here. So there's all those types of negative things that people hook onto, and then they stay stuck in that. What that does is it starts to trigger their nervous system. So they get into a sympathetic state where their adrenaline starts to go and their cortisol levels raise. And so they get stressed, right? And there's tools to get out of that. So that's where the courage loop comes in. What we teach in Unbeatable Mind is, okay, you have first the pause moment of, I'm not my thinking state. This is a thought. Okay. And then breathe. That's the next one. Take a deep breath. And then you can start to regulate that sympathetic and take it back into a parasympathetic just by simply elongating the exhale. So you can take a 5-count inhale and a 7-count exhale and start to calm the nervous system down, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, this is just a thought. It's not a threat, let's say, and I'm breathing now. What's something I can say to myself that's going to encourage me to shift? So it can be like, I've got this, right? Easy, I've got this. Or I'm strong and everybody here loves me. Everybody sees me. So if it's a threat in a conversation, is this person cares about me. I care about this person. And that's a little different than courage, but that's shifting into positivity. So say it's now facing a fear, like having a crucial conversation. There's a conversation you're avoiding and you're scared and you're telling yourself all those stories. And so you're in the fear loop of like, the conversation's just going to go bad. Well, a lot of times because people have that expectation and they're in fear, it actually gets created in some ways. So the conversation doesn't go well versus, okay, how can I take 3 perspectives here and lean into the discomfort of this conversation, ask questions, get super curious about where this person's coming from, and schedule time to have the conversation with the person. And then going in with, I've got this, there will be a resolution. So it's all positive. So it's kind of going from that negative framework to the positive framework. Does that answer your question?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, what you're sharing with me is what I'm also familiar with which is the witness process. And I've shared this with people that I've worked with as well. But what I find with the whole witness process, once you actually understand the process, you can just kind of follow the steps, follow the one witness, interdict, redirect, maintain. But the trouble is sometimes we can't even, the first part, which is witnessing, when you watch the news or you're faced with someone that really challenges you, it's hard to disconnect and take an objective view of the situation. So where that's concerned, what would you suggest for someone to do when they're faced with a challenging situation?
I think the breath is key for that, and for me in my own life experience, when I get really stimulated and I feel emotions come up that aren't positive and I'm feeling challenged, I go immediately to my breath. And then that, like what you're saying, sometimes it can be actually asking, let's say if it's a situation where you can't ask, hey, I need a minute. So putting in a request to another person, like, I need a minute, and then center yourself before you re-engage. Now, if it's not like that, say it's an external experience, like walking down the street and all of a sudden being in a riot. Like that's happened to me before when I was in Spain. I was just walking down the street and all of a sudden I turned a corner and I was in the middle of a huge riot. And I was like, okay. And I then breathe, focus, what are my options? That's one of the things that, in like say in that situation, what are my options here? How am I going to exit this experience safely? I think the witness, you hit on something really important there, because for most people, if they haven't developed the witness, they just are their thoughts. They just are their feelings. They are what's happening, right? So they're merged with all of that. So everything's happening real time. And that's way harder to disengage and shift and experience and get out of reaction mode. But once you learn that you're not your thoughts, you're not your feelings, that feelings are pointing towards needs and thoughts are pointing towards belief systems and also information coming in, but also recognizing that it's going through your filter. That's part of the witnessing, is seeing, okay, this thought is happening, but it's also because it's gone through my filter of what is real and what's not real. And again, that's due to like how I was raised, with family systems, social, where I grew up, what city, what country, all those things play into what do I think is happening right now. And it's pretty fascinating for me in that regard, whenever I because I contemplate this all the time, that thinking mind state of how do we trust ourselves? One of my main teachers, he always says, and this is like the deep core teachings of yoga, is we have a deep misunderstanding of what's really happening. So that's in the philosophy written down by the masters. And so that's like that, like, okay, once I've shifted into the witness and I know that, and I can look at my thoughts and say, oh, I have a deep misunderstandings here, and my feelings are real because I'm having a feeling. Say I'm angry, that's real for me, but the anger is pointing towards a need. So then if I can connect to like, what's that need? And it's, I need, let's say, safety, or I need connection, I need trust, right? It'll point to something. Then I can very quickly get out of, let's say, if it's a conversation, any sort of conflict, and make a request of somebody. But still going back, I know I went on a little bit tangent there, the breath, always the breath, because ultimately we can change what's physiologically happening to us through breathing, which is just so cool, right? So if I get triggered and I get into fight or flight, then I can shift that. And I've had times where I was extremely scared, like because of, again, like being in a situation that was an external, like traveling, feeling threatened. And when it was like, okay, I need to get out of this environment, and that breath came right in. Okay, deep breaths and pay attention, what's happening. So again, I'll ask you back, like if that answers your question, or if you have a follow-up question.
I do. I think I definitely want to dive into the breath, because the breath, people say, just breathe. It almost seems so simple to say, like, just breathe. Yeah. But it's simple, but at the same time, it's abstract for some, because I think in the way we live, we have kind of this, a lot of people have dysfunctional breathing patterns. They're breathing from their chest rather than the diaphragm, and using the whole system. So where the breath practice is concerned, is there, and you shared that you specialize in breath work, maybe you could share like a 101 on how can someone really start breathing better, breathing more?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're right about the dysfunctional breathing patterns, and that can take forms in different ways. So if you can see it in people when they inhale and their shoulders lift, and they're doing a lot of chest breathing. Now they're still using their diaphragm, because no matter what, the diaphragm is the main muscle of the breath. So it's happening, but they're not using the breadth or the space in which their whole lungs can expand and really get as much, oxygen in there. So I think one of the first things that people can do is just start to change from being mouth breathers to nose breathers. So the nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating and speaking. And there are times, of course, to exhale through the mouth. I think there's very soothing elements to taking a deep sigh of an exhale. And so that's a side note. But really, when we breathe through our mouth, we're limiting the exposure of the benefits of getting the air in through the nose and having the breath come into the body that way. And so I think just that's the first step. Like, if you don't breathe in through your nose and out through your nose, start, right? And then the next step is start to pay attention to when you hold your breath. So that was like a lifesaver for me. When I first got into yoga and meditation, I was a professional chef, and I had tons of physical pain in my body, and I was super stressed out and pretty like uptight all the time. And I noticed pretty quickly, once I started doing breath practice as meditation, that when I was in the kitchen, I was holding my breath like when I was in the middle of, flipping pans and all that kind of stuff. I was just like, and I would get it done. And then, so once I started to pay attention to that, it's like, oh, I hold my breath in times when I'm really stressed out. So that'd be the second one, is just pay attention. When do you hold your breath? And then pay attention to, can you inhale and exhale at equal parts? So is your inhale longer or shorter than your exhale? And can you start to kind of regulate that? So before we, like we teach box breathing in the system, where you're holding your breath in between the inhale and exhale. Like before you ever start doing that, you got to start just inhaling and exhaling through the nose at an equal part and really connect to that. So that would be like the next step, which is amazing. The other piece you can do is hold on to the sides of your rib cage or your lower back and your belly, and notice when you take an inhale, does it all go up into your chest? Are you able to, like a barrel, feel the torso expand out? And that's what you want to feel, to have to know that you're using the muscles appropriately. You're going to feel that side body expand out, and the chest will start to, like a lot of people say belly out first, but realistically, it all kind of happens simultaneously unless you're really focusing. So that you will feel the belly come out a little bit at first, because that's the diaphragm, right? But then the chest will, and you can just feel it. And so I would say spend, 1-2 minutes a day breathing in, breathing out, and feeling, and seeing if you can start to put movement in those areas that aren't moving. So for a lot of people, it helps to lay on their backs, even though it's harder to breathe laying on your back, because then they can feel their back touch the ground, and they can start to try to push their back into the ground. So there's things like that, or putting, a little soft something on your belly and laying on your back and watching it rise. So you can start to train that muscular, especially for people that are really breathing up here. And unfortunately, that's another side note, is people that have anxiety and depression, they often breathe up here, and then it creates more anxiety and depression, because it's like this, self circle of not getting enough air and not exhaling. So that would be my next step, is once you kind of concentrate on the inhale, exhale for a little bit, then you start to touch your torso, do that. And then the next step would be, if you want to start to deepen your breath. So say you notice wow, I can only breathe in and out through 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. I barely can breathe. And that's very real for some people. Well, then you want to try to start elongating the exhale a little bit. So, okay, can you breathe 2 in and 3 out? And see if you can do that, because that's going to build your lung capacity and actually start to develop the muscles around the lungs to get more air in. So there's a lot more, I've taught workshops on the breath for 3 days at a time. So there's so much we can say about breathing. But if you're just starting out, the first is, what's the quality of your breath? When do you breathe? When do you not breathe? Can you start to bring the breath into those moments when you don't breathe? And notice how it will start to shift your thoughts. That would be the next layer, and how it shifts your state of mind when you're not breathing, to bring in that quality of breath. So trying to think if there's any other really key things.
I think the key thing as well is, you've said a lot about breath, and that's just probably a tip of the iceberg, a fraction of what you know and your experience. I mean, I resonate with the nasal breathing aspect, because ever since applying nasal breathing, I've improved my gait, I've improved my aerobic capacity as well. All thanks to Mark's podcast with the guys from Power Speed Endurance. I'm actually doing their Out of Breath course as well.
Cool.
So where breath is concerned, maybe let's make it super practical. I mean, maybe we could do it like a 2 minute, for example, for someone that's watching this right now, maybe you can run us through like a 2 minute breath practice that they can incorporate into their lives from this day onwards. Could we do that?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's do then a inhale, where you have your hand, so putting one hand on your belly area and then one hand on your chest area, so you can start to connect. Now this is the front side of the body, so you don't want to neglect the back side of the body, but this would be a place to start. And you'll inhale for a count of 4 and exhale for a count of 5. And we'll just do that, and I'll cue us for a minute or so. Does that sound good? And if you can't exhale through your nose, so for people that are like, that's just too much, then do a small, like, pinhole exhale through your mouth. That would be the option. So first, just exhale all the air out completely. And then we'll begin. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And just notice if your thoughts are wandering, come back to the focus of the breath and how the body's moving. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. We'll do 4 more rounds. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. One more round. Inhale. Exhale. Nice. Then just go back. You can release your hands. Take a deep breath in. And now exhale out through the mouth. And just take a minute to notice how you feel.
I don't need a minute. I need just a few seconds.
Second, yeah.
I know I feel great.
Yeah.
So
that's really simple, and you can feel the movement in your body and start to connect.
I love it. I love it. And that's the thing. I think breath work is just so important, and it's really the first pathway to response and state management. Really,
yeah.
It's incredible. So speaking of state management in terms of unbeatable mind and in terms of mental toughness and mental resiliency, I would like to kind of tap your brains into what having an unbeatable mind means. What does mental toughness mean to you?
I think for me, like, one thing we just did with the breath, and I cued in the middle, like, notice if you're, thinking about something else, come back. Part of mental toughness is focus. So, and I would say a large part of it is that we train the mind to focus on one thing. And so that's single point focus. And in the yoga tradition, that's called dharana. And it's a prelude to meditation. So that's, I think, one of the big parts. Another one was when we talked about the fear and the courage loop piece, is that toughness to notice, when am I in a state of negativity or fear, and shifting it. And knowing that I am the master of my mind. The mind is not the master of me. And that ultimately that this amazing mind that we're given is a tool. And that this, let's say, if you will, the spirit or the essence of which we are can direct that tool. That, again, takes training and focus. And so that's another part. And then the other piece is leaning into discomfort and knowing when leaning into discomfort will serve the greater good for ourselves and others. So there's definitely times where if something's painful, it's not a good idea. Like physically, like in SEAL Fit, they say pain is weakness leaving the body. And as a healer, in my opinion, it's like not always. Sometimes pain is an indicator, like you need to stop, like before you blow your knee out. But I think the difference is that's where you learn to know your body and know your mind and know when is it a false, again, going back to that false, thing appearing real versus a real. So is the pain sensation, like, you have tattoos, I have tattoos, that's painful, but that's a deep sensation, right? And so you can lean into that sensation and have it not be pain anymore. And so the same goes for mental toughness, is I can lean into this discomfort or the pain of, like, say I've done, one of the 12-hour events for SEAL Fit, and you can lean into like the discomfort of, I'm holding the sandbag over my head. I've been moving for 11 hours and my arms feel like noodles, but I have to keep it over my head for like the next 5 minutes. That's overriding the body, the sensation saying, you don't have enough strength, put your arms down, and the mental toughness is saying, no, I'm not going to. And so there's those two kind of conversations. And then that can be applied, in life. Like we were talking before the interview about me walking in the Himalayas barefoot. And that was very much mental toughness. It was, for me, it was a shift, but I was, I had 50 pounds on my back. I was going from, Kathmandu up, and I got up to about 16,000, 17,000 feet. And so I was hiking on little tiny pebbles and rocks. And there was one point that, we got to snow, and I put plastic bags around my feet, and everyone's got their like super gear on that had been planning to trek. And I was it was a meditation for me. It was a prayer to the earth. There was a lot of things going on about it, that why I was doing it. But there was a component of mental toughness of, step by step with weight on my back and stepping on little tiny pebbles. It's a shift of perspective. It's like, okay, this, I can either look at it as extremely painful, or I can look at it as the earth giving me acupuncture every step I take. And that's what I did. And so I think that's mental toughness, and shifting into courage, shifting into determination. And it's different for each of us, right? So I don't know, for you, like, if you found that in your own life, like where it's like knowing when to lean into discomfort, and then also knowing when like this discomfort is actually indicating that a change needs to happen.
I agree with that. I mean, for me, I look at it from more right now, especially from a training perspective, because I tore both my pecs doing an eccentric phase of the bench press. And I think the thing about injury is that it kind of makes you learn. It makes you more intuitive with your body, and not to push it to its limits because you know that you're going to hurt yourself. I think the body actually gives you kind of little taps, signals. But if you don't listen to it, it's just going to give you a big smack in the head, and then you're going to be like, okay, maybe I should learn my lesson. So I think which brings me to the next aspect, which is intuition. And I know you're a highly intuitive person, and most people, would like to be intuitive, whether it's eating, just being aware of different situations. But how can someone tell whether it's, whether they're intuitive, it's an intuitive decision, being in connection with their heart and mind, to biasness? Because there are these two things, because our biasness from, like our history, like you shared earlier, our cultures, our past experiences, that could lead us to make intuitive decisions which aren't true, aren't intuitive. So how would someone tell from the two?
It's such an important difference, right? And so I even make a distinction between instinct personally. So I think instinct is animal. Like, we're all animals. And even though, for some reason humans have separated themselves and don't call themselves animals, we are all animals. And so in that, there's instinct. There's going back into that fight or flight. There's that something's in me that's telling me something, right? That's really different than intuition. Intuition is a higher mind, a higher state of consciousness. It's the wisdom body, if you will. I think one of the best ways to start to cultivate and train it is to know your mind. So when you talk about the biases, I first have to do self-study. So life to me is about self-study. I'm continually wanting to know myself deeply. not just the surface of who I am, but who am I and why, and whose voice is that inside my head, and is it really mine? And unpacking that, right? And then so that's like the mind piece, knowing the conditioned state. And and I've done years and years of that unpacking, and like, whose voice is what, where did that come from, was I born in that way? And it's like, no, I wasn't. Okay, so where did I learn that? How does it serve me? Do I want to hold on to that belief system? And that's one piece. Then there's the physical health. So I think that I think some people are born in, honestly, just really tapped in, like, more clairvoyant, psychic, intuitive. And so for them, maybe they don't need to take care of their bodies in the same way to develop intuition. But I think for people that aren't necessarily born in, tapped in like that, they really need to have a healthy body, because it's the conduit. It's that antenna that's going to tap into wisdom body, collective consciousness, information that's there for you if you're willing to see it, right? But that takes health. So I think mental health, mental knowing, like knowing ourselves, and then physical health and emotional health, and knowing our emotions too. How do our emotions drive us? What are the, let's say, the main emotions I feel most of the time versus, the more sub emotions, and why? So that would start to help me unpack some of my biases so that I can clear the way for intuition. And I think intuition comes from, really aligned with heart, really, and then also with what they call the third eye, right, in the spiritual traditions. So, and as well as the crown chakra, or the kind of the gateway into information. And to develop that, if you do that kind of, everybody first has to know what their biases are, right? And so, like, I know what mine are, and I still act out of them. I can still, and it's like, and that's just human nature. So that's a constant growth thing, right? And that's everybody, unless, you're like an enlightened master. That's how we're going to roll for our lifetimes. But with that, I also know how to, let's say I'm working with a client and I'm going to I know how to remove Catherine, like take Catherine out of the equation and become a vessel, a vehicle for information for the client. And that's intuition to me. That's like straight, my heart connects to their heart, and I'm able to, and then I'm able to open up to what information they may need to know, or I may need to know. Now that's more in a client, coaching situation, let's say, or a healing situation. But if it's in day-to-day life, then I'll start to pay attention. If it hits me like in my gut, that's instinct. If something like boom, and we've all done it. We've all been like, get an instinctual hit, and then we override it with logic, and we do it anyways. And then, whether it's immediate feedback that our instinct was right, or like a year later, our instinct, we'll always get the feedback. Like, you can, like, I got conned out of all my money once. And once it happened and I was like healing from that experience, I could go back to the moment that I first interacted with the person that conned me. And I got that instinctual hit, the animal hit, like danger, but I overrode it very quickly. Right now, intuition to me is more like, if you will, like ethereal, it's more of the vibration in which we're all part of. So there's information that we can all tap into, but we have to slow down. We have to train our minds to focus. We have to train our minds to be able to be in between thought, even, if that makes sense. Because the thinking is not the intuition. The only thing that our thinking is going to do to serve intuition is to translate whatever we're picking up. So it's more energetic. I don't know if that makes sense, but so, there's lots of ways to develop it. But the main thing I say to most people is, start taking care of yourself, basically. Take care of your body, and I know, like, with your summit, this is a health summit. So a lot of people are interested in health and fitness and taking care of themselves. Eating foods that are high vibration, right? So eating foods that are going to help you resonate and tap into that more like ethereal energy. And then there's, of course, trial and error. And it takes radical self-honesty, I think, to really develop intuition, because there has to be that ability to say, oh, I said that was my intuition, or I thought that was my intuition. And now, like, again, in reflection, and then it also takes a lot of self-reflection. In reflection, I can see how it was actually a projection or a transference. It was something in me that was seeing that because it was about me. And so that takes a lot of like looking inward. And then the other piece around developing intuition is meditation. Hands down, I think, like, for myself, I was pretty tapped in as a kid, and then I kind of forgot, because I can go back to when I was a smaller child and all the weird, amazing things that were going on with my intuition, and then that social programming happening and forgetting. And so when I started to meditate and take like long seated silences, I started to really tap into it again. And so it's hard to explain, but your heart responds, not the physical heart, but like the energy in the chest area will respond in that intuitive level. And the same with like that area in the third eye, there's like a openness about it. And it's so hard to articulate. So I know it can sound kind of weird, and then the same with the direct downloads. It's like, it's different than thinking. You just get information all of a sudden. It's like, I wasn't even looking for that information. I wasn't, right? Like, there was no searching for that. Say if I was trying to intuit something about you, Luke, if I was trying to intuit something, it's guaranteed probably going to be my bias, my projection, versus if I just open up and intuit, and then I wait and I listen, the intuition comes in. So,
the thing about intuition is really it's abstract at the same time, because it's hard to kind of describe. I read the book The Intuitive Warrior, and about how, I can't remember what his name was. He was just kind of being aware of certain things in the environment, in the war zone, and he decided that maybe we shouldn't go for this mission because something is going to happen here. And true enough, the next day there was like a bomb in that particular part of the town. So I think it's one of those things where it needs to be free from biasness, and you're really like an antenna, like tuning the FM band to the right channel, and then the right music flows in to your mind and your body, and you act or react just as a result of it. So I think the thing, what you brought up earlier, is self-honesty and self-reflection is key. And I think one aspect of self-reflection and self-honesty, which I have experienced myself, is healing from trauma, whether it's death, whether it's a domestic violence, whether it's an abusive relationship or anything. So somewhat, it's, with this whole pandemic, it's doom and gloom, and it just almost accentuates the past and the stress and the negativity that you've had in your life. So for someone who has emotional trauma, who maybe has been sweeping it under the carpet and maybe turning to alcohol, drugs, and things like that, what would you say to them to actually look within?
I am definitely have had lots of trauma, from early age and then into my adult life as well. And so I think one of the steps is knowing that you're not alone. So that it's a very human experience. We all experience trauma in one form or other. And yes, some are a little more horrific to digest, like when we think of the trauma. And at the same time, we all do have, so everybody has, in this modern world, car accident, that's trauma. There's some sort of trauma. But the first one is just knowing that it's part of being a human. And I think that helps neutralize it a little bit. And the next one is going back to like the idea of, radical self-honesty, is then that radical self-compassion. So having compassion that the pain is there and that the suffering is there. And also that goes into the honesty, is realizing that the avoiding or the numbing out isn't making it go away. and potentially it's even getting bigger because of it. So and if you can find somebody to assist you, you know, whether it's a therapist, a friend, but somebody that can hold space for you to do some healing work is very powerful. But the first step is choosing, like, okay, I'll share a little bit of my personal belief in life. I don't think any of us are broken. Like, you know, a lot of people say you're broken, you need to heal. I don't believe that. I actually think we're completely whole as is. And at the same time, I love that saying, like, you have to break your heart so the light can shine through. So in that, like, when we have trauma, emotional, physical, mental things happen, it does something to our nervous system. So we have to first, like, that's where breath work can be really powerful, help heal that. Or there's things like EMDR, right? Or EFT, like where you're the tapping technique that you can help start to reprogram the nervous system. So that helps. But I think for me that empowers me to know, like, nobody broke me, you know, I'm whole. Like, that's just empowering. So, okay, I'm not a victim, you know, and maybe at one point I was a victim, but now I'm a survivor. And you know what? I'm actually a warrior and I'm fierce. So I think that's part of the step of healing too, is going from, like, yes, I was that, but I'm not that anymore. So, okay, do I want to stay in that victim mentality? Do I want to stay feeling broken? Or do I want to start shifting into surviving out of that, and then taking the warrior lens and say, you know what? I'm actually going to transform this pain into passion, into compassion, into love, into kindness for others. Because just like me, they suffer too. So that's where it's like, this is a human experience. I'm not alone. Everybody has pain. Everybody suffers. Mine feels bigger than everybody else's, you know, and I'm just saying that can be the case for a lot of people, and that's okay. And now what do? I breathe. I do nurturing things for myself. I don't say I have to change it all in one moment. You know, I do the baby step method of what's that one, or the 1% method of each day of what's one more thing I can do that's really nurturing for myself. So say I use, like you said, alcohol, right, to numb the pain. Okay, well, I'm not going to, if I'm not ready to admit that, like, if you're an alcoholic, let's for that. If I'm not ready to admit I'm an alcoholic, then maybe I can start to go on a walk for 5 minutes, saying something loving to myself, saying something kind to myself before I go have that first drink. So, you know, and there's like those slow shifts, right? I think compassion is the biggest key for healing from any sort of trauma. And I've done a lot of research and studies in trauma. There's one man named Peter Levine. He was the one that actually kind of coined the phrase trauma back in the 70s. And he believes just having somebody else present when you're doing the healing work is super impactful. And he's done a lot of research around it. So that's where I say, if like it's a therapist or a friend, you know, a spouse, somebody that can hold your hand and hold space. Now that has to be someone you can trust, right? But there's something in that collective sharing, I think, for people that's really powerful too. And this is another thing that I could go on and talk to you about for hours, because this is one of my passions, is how do we take ourselves from that place, all of us, of the sense that we're alone and we're isolated and no one will understand, because I think that's part of what's going on in the world that doesn't serve us anymore, and shift that condition to actually like, oh, everybody around me, everyone on this planet has these experiences. Now, again, the stories might not look the same, right? The exact experience won't look the same, but the pain is the same. The suffering is the same. And that in itself, that means that we're connected. And then it goes from these, you know, little isolated islands everywhere into that we're all links in a chain.
Definitely, and I love what you just said as well, and I fully resonate with that we are all born perfect, we're born whole, we're infinite, but just somewhere along the way we have made certain decisions that kind of that kind of compound, and it becomes our belief system for our perspective of the world, because these are all just filters. And the more we clean and clear the filters, the more we go deep within, and then the more we can just become who we were born to be and who we really are. So I think that's beautiful. And for me, like I actually write like, and this is something that you guys can also do. I journal every morning, and I write something like, I love you, I accept you, and I believe in you. Because a lot of times we tend to we're always self-critical, and we don't actually overly self-critical more than anyone else in the world. And I think sometimes to really take a step back and just be grateful and be appreciative of who you are and what you represent in the world. So I want to really dive into your latest project. Okay. I understand that you are going to be releasing your book soon, or is it out already? Releasing
Not yet.
Not yet. The Sacred Silence. Maybe tell us a little bit about the book, why you decided to do it, and what it's about.
Okay, so Sacred Silence is a book on meditation and visualization. It's mainly a discussion, a philosophical discussion with practical application of how to meditate. And why I did it is I really wanted to share this idea of a shift, kind of what I was talking about, the isolated belief versus the whole and connected belief. So I believe that there's a potential of a shift on a global consciousness in the energy of love. Now, I discuss it in the book and I wrote the book, so it's very short. It actually is only going to be, I think by the time like it gets formatted and everything, like maybe 80 pages. Like it's really, I wanted it to be an easy read. I wanted it to be something where someone could, if they wanted to learn how to meditate, they could pick it up and not feel like, oh, it's like a huge book on meditation. Like, because what's the number one thing I hear as a meditation teacher? I don't have time to meditate. Well, if you don't have time to meditate, you don't have time to read a book on meditation, right? So I made the book really simple. And so in the short exploration of the love piece, I actually think this will be another book later on in my life, but it's about that paradigm shift. And it really is discussing that we have to know ourselves. It's a lot of what we've talked about here today, Luke. Like, we have to get intimate with the nature of our minds and our thoughts. And the only way to do that is to sit still. And I pose in the book, if you don't want to spend time with yourself, that's the first question. Like, why wouldn't you want to spend time with yourself? Like, why a lot of people are like, I don't have time. You don't have time to sit and be with yourself, just doing nothing, no distractions, just to feel into who you are. So that's kind of the premise of the book. It's really a simple manual for, again, beginners and or for people that have like a long-standing practice but want to hear my perspective. My teaching in meditation comes all from meditation, except for my very first meditation teacher. I was given one very simple meditation when I first started, but everything else have been like what we're talking about intuitively, pretty direct downloads. And, so I just tell kind of the story of like, when I first started, I didn't want to meditate. I was like, this is a waste of time. Again, I was working in kitchens. Everything was like per the millisecond. I was like, sit down for 30 minutes. You gotta be kidding me. And, but just, so it's a real simple exploration of the mind. So there's a lot of questions in the books, of like, who are we? Why are we here? What's your thought? What's your bias? A lot of what we talked about. And then again, just guided meditations that are all written in I form. So when I record it, I'll do an audible version. Then I will do it in the U form so people feel guided. But then if people are reading it, it'll be a mantra. Like what you were saying, I love myself. I forgive myself. I am perfect. I am whole. So I wrote a lot of the meditations that way so they can be affirmation statements. That's it. But yeah, I was motivated because I felt like it was time to share, my 20 years of what's come up for me in my life and how I meditate, and hopefully if I can help one person, then I'm happy.
I love it. I actually can't wait to read it. It really resonates with me, and I also resonate with the fact that I used to be like you. What is meditation? What is a chakra? You know, like this bodybuilder guy talking about chakras. This is just what an aura is. This, and to think that I'm actually looking into that and the colors and energies, and I'm still into fitness and into this whole Navy SEAL mindset, but also exploring a different side of energetics. I think it's just so important to.
That's what I always tell people too. I'm the same, because everyone's like, well, you're so like that. I'm like, but I wasn't when I first got into this at all. Like, I never thought I'd be one of those people. It's like, here's a turquoise crystal to really help you ground,
Yeah, it's like exactly like chakra. How many grams of protein is a chakra? Is the base chakra. It's just so I'm 100%. I'm 100% with you. So I guess as just as a little bit of a wrap up question, and this is something that I kind of ask every speaker, and just for a little bit of a hope and for a new world ahead, what is the one thing that a person can do to take control of their lives and their impact in the world based on all of your years of wisdom and experience?
Yeah, I say breathe and take time to sit still and learn the nature of yourself. That is the most powerful thing one can do, to take their power and believe in themselves and know how to direct it. So breathe. Breath always. Breath first, always. I'll echo my stepdad in that one, who's the founder of Unbeatable Minds. Breath. And then meditate. Meditation not only saved my life, but it built my life, and it still does to this day. It is profound, and everybody and anybody benefits from it. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you very much, Catherine. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this presentation. A wise man once said, "You make a new life by making new choices." Now, if you know that what you eat matters, if you know that health comes from healthy living, then the time to make new choices is now. And just imagine owning the summit for life. Click the button for more. Maybe you know our stories. Luke and I lost family to cancer, and we wish we would have known sooner what you are learning here today. So please, share the summit, take action, and let's support each other. Thank you. This is Toby and Luke signing off, and we can't wait to see you for the next presentation.